This is brought to you by Hit Wicket, the cricket game that has playing and strategy all in your pocket.
Bear with me for a second, but the Ranji Trophy semi-final of 1981-82 is one of the most important matches in the history of batting. Bombay, or now Mumbai, were in a lot of trouble. I mean, they were basically cool. They had lost the first innings, which meant in the Ranji semi-finals, a first innings lead was enough to proceed through to the next game. And Karnataka didn't just want to win on that first innings. They had a chance of beating Bombay, the best team in Ranji history, by an innings. They went for it. And the wicket was spinning sideways. So they went for the kill with their left-arm orthodox bowler. Raghuram Bhatt had already taken 8 wickets in the first innings. But Bombay's captain was Sunil Gavaskar. And he thought about doing something different, like promoting their only left-hander up the order. He did that, and he made 9. And while Bombay needed quality batting, the great Indian opener kept sliding himself down the order. And there's probably a reason for this, because there was a huge discussion happening about what would happen next. Jarrod, the team manager, was freaking out because of Gavaskar's plan. But the little master had his own way, and he went out to bat down the order, left-handed. Not a switch hit or reverse sweep. He stood there as if he was a left-hander after a career spent on the other side of the bat. And he only did it when he was facing the left-arm spinner. When he was facing the off-spinner, he obviously batted his traditional right-handed way. And Gavaskar batted for ages, blocking out as a left-hander at one end and conventionally at the other. And Bhatt tried every single trick he had, but he just couldn't get past Gavaskar, who saved his team from an innings defeat, batting on the other side of his body most of the time. The reason I'm telling you all this is, India play spin on a level that is, frankly, insane. Even if you just look at the last couple of decades, Rahul Dravid, Sachin Tendulkar, VVS Laxman, and Varun Sehwag all played. I mean, we don't have to go all the way back to the VJs to understand how good India has been against spin for so long. And that doesn't even include all their domestic great players of spin who don't even make it to the international level. I mean, look at Sehwag. He didn't actually consider off-spinners as bowlers, and really went after every single spinner without any thought. Dravid was almost algorithmic with the way he played cricket and has inspired other batters since. And VVS Laxman could use his feet to get down to a ball that was pitched in the footmarks and still drive it through the covers. Even in the modern era, we've seen great batters of spin from India: Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, and of course, Cheteshwar Pujara. Of recent times, Shreyas Iyer, Rishabh Pant, and Shubman Gill have also been very good players when it comes to spin. And of course, in T20, we're seeing this whole new generation of Shivam Dube, Rajat Patidar, and Abhishek Sharma, who are at the forefront of just smacking spin everywhere in that format. Yet, in the last few years, the narrative has been that Indians are not really good against spin anymore. And it's not really format specific either. They've struggled at home in tests from 2001 to 2023. They knocked it around in a crucial match in the 2022 World Cup, and they lost an ODI series in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So, the big question has to be, do India now have a problem with spin?
If you love cricket on a deep spiritual level and want to be involved when no matches are being played, we have the game for you. Hit Wicket is so good that Harsha Bhogle and me have backed it. And that's a lot of nerd energy behind one game. This is a strategic game of cricket, and it's not just about whacking your screen really, really hard with your finger. This isn't a game where you swipe all around to try and hit the ball. You work out what works best based on real-life cricket situations. For instance, dot balls bring pressure, 1s and 2s lead to 4s. There is no way you can just hit a 6 every ball or take wickets all the time. This is proper cricket, yet it still has some special gaming powers in there as well. And so this game is about playing, but also building and managing your team. You are the batter, bowler, owner, coach, captain. It's your dream, right? And there are no ads, it's just cricket. Download Hit Wicket now and bring out the cricket legend in you, because Hit Wicket is a cricket game made for you and supported by other cricket nerds. Stick it in your pocket today.
Let's start with the most recent format they played, ODI. India started averaging over 40 in the 1990s, and their highest overall mark against spin bowlers came in the previous decade. That was also when the 2 new balls was introduced. But how did they fare compared to their opposition? In the 1970s, the Indian team averaged 21.55 less than their opponents against spin. Now, there wasn't a lot of ODIs played in those days. But they were slightly ahead in the 1980s and considerably better every decade since. The batters and spinners were at their best in the 2010s, and that is very important to remember. And when we look at it in terms of ratio of their average and the opponent's average versus spin, it was 1.63 in the 2010s. Their ratio in the current decade, though it has only been 4.5 years, does seem to drop off. But it is still their second best ever in history. But because it's being compared to their best, people are noticing it. And now some of this also might be because they've had better white ball spinners in the modern era. But this is also clearly not their worst era of playing spin in ODIs. If anything right now, they have started to attack more. In the 2010s, they looked to knock the ball around and only go after it, the 35th over. Now they have followed a similar style that, of course, England has pioneered, and they're not worried about being set and play safe. It's an entirely different model. So if we do a breakdown of the averages by year since 2000, it was more than 70 in 4 different years. But for the first time since 2007, the opposition averaged more than India against spin in 2020 and 2021. Even if this is partly down to attacking, it's also something that we haven't seen before. But of course, we mentioned before, the speed also matters. India scored more than 6 runs per over in 2021, but that was from only a few games against England and Sri Lanka. They were above 5 runs per over every year in a 10-year period from 2014 to 2023, and they were noticeably scoring quicker than their opponents from 2014 to 2018. And about the same in 2019, and then slower in a few years after that. They were above 5 runs and over for a long period there. But they were also noticeably scoring quicker than their opponents between 2014 and 2018. But from 2019 onwards, you do see that things start to change a little bit again. And part of this is probably from them trying to attack and being dismissed. And the truth is that there are many factors here. India's dominance with the bat started with Kohli and Rohit entering their peak batting. In 2017, India also moved on from finger spin and gave a go to Kuldeep Yadav and Yuzvendra Chahal, meaning that they now had a wrist-spinning duo who was dominating around the world. And if we just look at Kohli and Rohit's record against spin by decade in ODI cricket, there's some fun things here. Rohit averaged 84 and struck at 97 before, while Kohli was 76 and striking at 94. They scored a lot of runs at a very healthy rate. However, in the 2020s, Rohit's role changes to that of an ultra-aggressive, particularly in the power play. His average is less than half of what it was, but his strike rate goes up to 112. And of course, he can score that quickly because he has so many attacking options available to him. And that approach probably helps him on turning tracks because he's scoring runs so quickly that the ball with his name on it doesn't take him out. Now, this also makes Kohli look bad. But look slightly closer here, and you'll still see he's averaging over 50 against the turning ball and an 85 strike rate, which is a little slow, but not horrendous. It's just that beforehand, when he was in his peak, he was a golden god against it. And look at him and Rohit versus the other players. They are huge in terms of true average and strike rate. Dhawan had a similar true strike rate, but didn't average anywhere near that. And then you can see the others are just way off. This decade, and Rohit is clearly the outlier here. He has a true average of 7 and a true strike rate of 32. But you can see there's quite a few players here that have done pretty well over a relatively smaller sample size. Kohli, though, has a true strike rate of -7, but is still a true average of +10. Most importantly, not only have these players aged, but they have changed their role. But there are some other interesting things when looking at India and spin. Rohit Sharma and even Rahul Dravid have talked about them not sweeping enough. Since 2010, their main scoring shot has been the on drive. They flick, glance, drive, and cut way more than they sweep. And in this time period, India have the lowest percentage of sweep shots by a team in the format. That allows other sides to set fields for them far easier than perhaps even for worse players of spin who happen to have more options. In the India-Sri Lanka series, the hosts attempted that shot a lot more and had far better returns than them. A better average strike rate and balls per dismissal. And this was something that Rohit was talking about. And the interesting thing is, when England were having success with them in the Bazball series, they also talked about it then. And what about just conditions, right? In the ODI World Cup last year, India scored more than 100 runs per wicket at 5.75 runs per over. Only New Zealand were quicker, and no one was close to them in terms of average. So it seems that when it really mattered on turning wickets, they played spin fine. And over a larger sample size, India ranked second in terms of average against spin and third in terms of scoring rate since the start of 2020. And they're in a cluster with New Zealand and South Africa, both teams who have improved a lot against spin, but also play a lot of it in places where the ball just doesn't turn. And as far as the overall record in this time period is concerned, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, UAE and West Indies are in the best for spin bowlers. And some of this, of course, is conditions-based, and the other part is just about opposition. But in terms of conditions, we have to look at India's average by venue country. And we can see that they have the lowest average in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. That probably makes sense because the ball is going to spin a lot more there than it is in those other countries. But these are also conditions where faster spinners bowl on ragging wicket. And is that the thing that is the biggest issue for India? Especially if you're trying to score quicker than you ever have before. And conditions matter even more in Test cricket. In the last few years, India started making more spin-friendly wickets at home, which is reflected in the averages. India is the place to be if you are a spinner in Test cricket at the moment. Their slow bowlers averaged 8 runs per wicket less than Bangladesh, who also like the ball to spin a lot. And India averaged 33 at home and 33 in Bangladesh. The rest of the countries here don't have to worry about that because they have other weapons or just no spinner. And this is really what I want to show. Because while Indians are scoring less against spin and Test at home, you can see that they are still outscoring their opposition about the same as always. What has changed is simply the amount of runs. The pitches are different, but in some ways the results are the same. This allows their bowlers to rest more and hopefully bowl into older age. But it completely changes Indian batting average, who traditionally feasted on flat home wickets. Since the start of the 1970s, India has consistently outperformed opponents against spin bowling in every decade. I don't think there's ever really been a disagreement that they're the best players of spin. However, when we look at just their batting averages in that time period, the 2020s is when they averaged the least. But this is also the period when the Indian spinners were most effective. No one could score runs on Indian wickets in Test matches anymore, including Indians. We also see that the ratio of the team and opposition averages is the highest in the 2020s, despite the fact that they averaged the least that they ever had with the bat since the start of the 1970s. So this tells you that considering the conditions, they're actually playing spin and bowling spin pretty well. And looking at Hawkeye data, India have faced over 4,000 balls of high spin and 3,000 deliveries of low spin respectively. Essentially, if it's more than 3 degrees, we consider that high. Obviously, for almost everyone, low spin is easier, except for Virat Kohli and Akshar Patel, who are better when the ball turns more. And India have seen a huge medium degree of turn in their last 3 series at home. Even the England series, where the pitches didn't actually spin as much, it was still above 3 degrees. India had their highest batting average versus England when the median degree of turn was 2.99, which is phenomenal batting. And the average fell to 26 when facing Australia, when the median spin went up to 3.65. In the Sri Lanka series, where it spun at 4.35 degrees, which is absolutely crazy, India still averaged 36. But this is the most fascinating graph. India are great against 90 to 99 km/h bowling when it spins less. But when it starts to turn, they basically can't play it at all. And of course, most teams would have that. But I wonder if India's lack of sweep shots also play a part here. On the other hand, when the speed is 80 to 89 km/h, they still average less when it turns more, but the average difference reduces a lot. Indians are set up to face this kind of spin because they use their feet. That's much harder once you get over 90 km/h. There's also some real random numbers under 80 km/h, but that is in part because they don't face it all that much. And let's specifically look at high spin now. We see that the team that India really struggled against here was Australia. And part of the reason was they averaged 14.73 when Australia bowled it over 90 km/h. That is the big difference between what the Australian bowlers and the England and Sri Lankans managed. Sri Lanka and India actually had no deliveries in the high 90 km/h amount. While England did, but they couldn't do it consistently. Australia bowled 516 of them compared to England's 160. So when you're bowling that fast to a team who can no longer use their feet, it means they have to sweep. But Indians only sweep 3% of their shots. So they become more of a target when you're bowling quicker at them. And now we need to get to T20. Since the start of this decade, India holds the highest average against spin amongst the top 10 ranked teams, and is narrowly second to England when it comes to runs per over. But I think you would look at this and say they are the best team against spin. In the 3 T20 World Cups during this period, India obviously just won the last one in the West Indies, reached a semi-final in Australia, and didn't do very well in the UAE. The weird thing is when you look at these World Cups is India actually really struggled against spin in the tournament in Australia. And the way that they went about the middle overs against England in that semi-final probably dictated why they were out of the tournament. I just don't think any Indian batters need to be dominated by Liam Livingstone's bowling. But there was a conscious effort to make sure that they had a change in the next tournament. High intent Rohit had the best strike rate. Akshar scored 34 runs off 21 balls, and Hardik Pandya was scoring pretty quick against spin as well. They also picked Shivam Dubey, who was there pretty much for that role. And even though Dubey didn't make any runs, he certainly made some teams worry a lot. So when we look at all this, if you look at last ODI World Cup and T20 World Cup, it would be hard to say that India was not the best team against spin in both of those editions. One of those was, of course, at home. And when you're talking about Test cricket, Indian batters are still the best players against the turning ball when it comes to that format. But things have changed. We now have people like Heinrich Klaasen exist. And spin is getting quicker, and India needs to adapt to that. Someone alerted me to the fact that Jamie Alter recently said India is no longer the best team against spin. You might be able to make that case in ODIs, though still, I just don't think it's true when you really go through the numbers. In T20, they are the best, although I still like the way that the South African middle order goes about it, but the top order is nowhere near what India can do. And in Tests, I still think they're the best team against spin. However, if you are comparing the Indian team to the Indian team of before, I think their numbers don't look quite as good. Some of that is conditions well beyond their control, and some of that is about intent. But there is also no doubt that spin is bowled quicker now, and India are scoring quicker in white ball cricket. And because of these two things, the averages are dropping a little. So are India suddenly bad against spin? No, they're still not bad against spin. They're still a very good team against the turning ball. But they are different. But then again, so is cricket right now. I mean, think about it this way. Is Rohit Sharma about to go out in a Ranji Trophy semi-final, move himself down the order, block it out for hours just to make sure that they don't have an innings loss, whether he's batting right-handed or left-handed? But one thing hasn't changed. When you talk to spinners around the world, they still tell you they would prefer to bowl to almost anyone else who is not India.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.